What can corporate America do? We've heard a lot of CEOs talk about it, a lot of CEOs pledge money, but beyond the talk and the money, what can we do to change the system?
Thank you, David. We have to first start by throwing out the old playbook for crises like this, which involves a corporation assembling a group of African Americans on a conference call, issuing an apology, the organization itself issuing an apology or a statement of solidarity on its website, and making some grants to the NAACP and the Urban League and getting back to business. That playbook will not work on this occasion. On this occasion, CEOs and boards are going to have to look deeply within their own policies and practices and ask themselves, how do we transform ourselves? Because transformation is what will be required, and that will require incentivizing performance, as we do in every other facet of corporate life. We need to incentivize boards to increase diversity. We need to incentivize CEOs to ensure that their C-suites are diverse. And we do that because this is a market, and market has investors. So I'm hopeful that investors who have influence in the market, investors like BlackRock, like many of the large fund managers, the asset managers, all together say it is time that we do better in corporate America. And that means literally doing what we do with everything else, counting and holding ourselves accountable for delivering on those targets.
We definitely need to see some diversity, as it were, at the top, and that's African American and Hispanic. I know you'd agree with that readily. At the top of these corporations, I think to this day in the Fortune 500, it's only like 4 or 5 African American CEOs. But going beyond that, what about some of the policies advocated for down in Washington, Darren? What about tax reform? What about things like capital gains tax? What about things like increasing corporate taxes? Because there has to be, doesn't there have to be some redistribution of the assets of America?
Well, we do have to have a conversation about our economy, because as a capitalist, a proud capitalist who believes that capitalism is the best way to organize an economy, I also believe that the current kind of capitalism we have in our country is not working for America. It is delivering outsized gains for people like me and you, David, because we've done incredibly well. If you own assets, if you own securities over these last years, we have done terrifically. But if you are the average working America, you have fallen behind. If you're the average person in the middle class in this country, you have fallen behind. And so we have to think about the policies, including tax policies, that ensure that we have shared prosperity in this country. We are not generating an economy today that is delivering on that promise. And that promise is essential for this country to survive.
It's a powerful point, Darren, and you take us beyond the C-suite, which is terribly important, the leadership of the corporations, to those of us who own assets. Because as a practical matter, that C-suite ultimately responds to people who own their shares. Are you seeing a movement within institutional investors to really demand accountability, transparency and accountability of the corporations?
I think it's too soon to know, but I think it will be interesting as many of the asset managers publish their annual letters, as they speak at conferences about their priorities. It will become clearer whether there is seriousness associated with some of the platitudes that so many have offered. Platitudes are helpful only if they are followed up with concrete actions.
Darren, do you have a sense that this time may be different? Because let's be honest, we've seen other instances in the past when people have said, we're going to do better. And then people go on, they get distracted, they go back to their old ways. Is there reason for hope here that this time actually the momentum will continue and even increase rather than just dissipate as we pay attention to something else?
David, I am very hopeful today about my country. I'm hopeful because I believe that the issue of racism, which throughout our history has had the air of deniability, racism after the murder of George Floyd on that street in broad daylight, the perpetrator being videotaped knew that he was being videotaped, but assumed that he could kill a man, a Black man, with impunity. I don't believe racism is deniable as an option for white Americans. And I believe that for most white Americans, it was a heartbreaking thing to see that. Because I don't think for most white Americans, a racist country is what we want. And I don't think for all of us that the idea of a country that is not guided by the principles of justice and opportunity and fairness, that's not a country that any of us want. We want to live in a country, as the poet Langston Hughes wrote, let America be America. And when that happens, when that day comes, we will all rejoice in the idea of a beloved community, one where each and every one of us has an opportunity to get on that mobility escalator, the one that I got on. Right. I'm in many ways a believer in what is possible in America. I was born in the bottom 1 percentile, and now I am firmly in the top 1 percentile. But I don't want to be a unicorn. I believe that this opportunity, the life that I have had and the privilege of living in this country and dreaming and having the possibility of realizing those dreams, that should be for every American, regardless of our zip code or our race.